Hello, and welcome to the Trans Agenda, a podcast by Trans Clinique. I'm your host, Niko, and I'm a trans man, and my pronouns are he and they. Every Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll be right here talking about the Trans Agenda. In this podcast, we'll delve into the unique challenges and experiences of trans folks, highlighting the voices of those who have lived it themselves. We'll explore issues such as navigating medical and legal systems, finding acceptance within family and community, and combating discrimination and violence. Our guests will share their personal stories and expertise, providing valuable insights and perspectives on this often misunderstood aspect of the human experience. Join us as we strive to educate, inform, and advocate for trans rights and visibility. Hello, and welcome to the Trans Agenda. I am here with Day. Hello. I'm your host, Niko Stormont. Day, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Day Lorza. I'm a software engineer and entrepreneur, and I live in Los Angeles, California. I moved from the Bay about a year and a half ago. And while I don't identify as trans, I am trans adjacent as I was born intersex.
Awesome. So thanks so much for coming out and being on the podcast and sharing your story with us. So I know that there's a lot of, I feel like, while people know what trans is generally, people sometimes don't know what intersex is. And I wonder if you could explain your experience as an intersex person and what that really means for you.
Yeah, so basically, we know gender is a spectrum, even though the conservative voices will let you know that it's binary, female and male. I am the living proof that gender is actually a spectrum. So the medical term for intersex is called AIS, which is androgen insensitivity syndrome. And there's an androgen receptor that's insensitive in the womb and in a certain trimester. And this signals the child inside, we're going to be male or female. So when this receptor is confused in the womb, essentially, you get somebody born like me, which is I was assigned female at birth. And later on, my mother found out there was some differences in my genitalia. Some people call it ambiguous. And once they ran the test, they found out that I was actually XY and not XX. And that started basically my life as a queer individual.
Yeah. So it started then. So when did you find out?
So I found out kind of abruptly. So it was, I was about 12 years old or so. And I went to the doctor. I thought I was just going to the pediatrician with my mother. And the doctor kept on saying he, right? And, medical doctors are notoriously not particularly sensitive to these.
For real?
Yeah, they're just like unaware. And I was just like, why do you keep on calling me he? And that day I found out that I couldn't have children. And it was a very sad day because, of course, you want you want to get married and have kids and stuff like that. And then after that, it was essentially like discovery of self and asking my mother a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how did you kind of have a sense that you were maybe different than other kids before you knew that, or was it just completely a surprise for you?
It was pretty much like it was pretty much a surprise, 100% surprise, because I didn't know what normal was at 12 years old, right?
Do we even know now? I mean, obviously,
like what is normal, right? We're queerdos for a reason, right?
Yeah, it's like whatever.
So yeah, I just started asking my mother a lot of questions in regards to how was I born and how did you know? And about 1 year, when I was about 1 year, I think about 10 months, they removed internal testes that I was born with. And again, that started the journey of being a queer individual, essentially.
Yeah, well, I'm curious, like, how have you felt within the queer community as an intersex person? Like, have you been able to come out to people? Mm-hmm. Have you been able to feel accepted? Mm-hmm. Because even I feel like within the queer community, people don't really know.
Yeah, it's not really talked about. It's the letter in the LGBTQIA plus, 2S it's a letter that's not really talked about much. And coming out as an intersex person, it was very difficult at first because I asked myself, why me? And why, I was very religious growing up. And I said, if God makes no mistakes, then, what am I? So it was very difficult trying to process this as just a kid growing up. And then also it was like my deepest, darkest secret growing up, right? Mm-hmm. Even with partners, I would be very reluctant to be with partners because, I would be like, well, what if they see that I'm different? Oddly enough, for me, there's some partners that just have no clue, and other partners essentially ask me like, hey, why are you different, And then I'll be like, come on, sit on my lap, we have a conversation. Let's have a conversation.
The birds and the bees. Yeah. Well, that's, that's good that you've been able to feel accepted. I wonder, is there any shame that you said it was like your deepest, darkest secret? Like,
yeah.
I wonder for other intersex people out here, because I think growing up I was learning about it, and the statistic was like 1 in 100 people, which I'm sure was underreported, to be honest.
Yeah.
So there are other intersex people out there. Like, how did you deal with that deepest secret mentality?
Yeah, it was something that I wasn't really proud of, right? Well, the first thing, it was like I didn't want to be queer, right? Like growing up, because I was really religious, right? And it goes back to this God thing, like, oh, God doesn't want me to be queer, and this is in my teens. Now I'm more spiritual. Well into my 20s, I still was something that I was hiding, and then finally, as I started talking about it more, I felt more comfortable in my own skin and being authentic, because I can only be me. I can't be something that I'm not. And then ultimately, I started telling non-partners. I would tell my friends. I remember I told you. And it's something, the more that you actually are acceptance with your authentic self, you start giving it so much weight, right? So there was some like resistance there, right. Just like, that it's not their business and stuff like that. And, the reason I'm talking about this now, because I've never publicly talked about this before, is because to tell another intersex person out there, like, it's okay, it's fine. If you're religious, God made you perfect, or you are perfect in this avatar that, that we're in, or this body that we're in. So yeah, it's been a constant growing process, and this is my coming out party, essentially.
I love it. Well, thanks for coming out with the trans agenda. And I love what you said is you're living proof that gender or sex really is like not binary, mm-hmm. and it really isn't. When I was in school for psychology, learning about neurobiology, mm-hmm. we're learning about chromosomes and how they pattern your DNA. Mm-hmm. I used to, when I was younger and trying to explain what trans was, I'd be like, oh, well, I have like a boy brain but a girl body.
Yeah.
Which is very oversimplified, to be honest. It's
mm-hmm.
more like a mosaic like piece in your head of gender, and sometimes some parts get a little like our background over here, you know what I mean? So I think it's beautiful the way that you're looking at it and that you're able to talk about that outwardly.
Yeah, I fully accepted it. And it was still a stigma until I remember I was dating this one person, right? And at this point I was like being forthright about it. I was like, hey, by the way, I just want to tell you that and it's right, the resistance, right? It's just like, should I say this? I just want to tell you that I'm intersex. And she was just like, oh, I think it's kind of hot. And as soon as she said that, right, as soon as she said that, I was like, okay, it's hot, great, cool. Like, I have no qualms about talking about this anymore. So, yeah, it's just like one of those moments that kind of just shift everything and put things into perspective. And yeah.
And I feel like, as a trans person, one of the first things that was said to me is like, I don't know if you'll ever find like a partner, right? Mm-hmm. Which that was, growing up a lesbian, that's like the worst thing you can say to
right.
Yeah. So it's scary, but there are people, like, it's not as big, I think, as our society makes it seem, or even as you yourself make it seem. So,
yeah.
I'm in a relationship, you're in a, we're doing fine.
Yeah, it's really not a big deal. If anything, your mind makes it gives it more weight than it actually does.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, so like, and if a person is offended by it or is like it's not their thing, then okay, like keep moving.
It's not the right person for you.
Yeah, it's not the right. And
oil and water, that's what I like to say.
Right, like honestly, I've never really had any issues like someone just like reject me because of that.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, not really me either. Or maybe I don't know. Anyway, but we're doing fine.
Yeah,
but I did want
fine.
to talk about. So you're also, really involved in the community through the tech space and app development. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about like what's going on with that. What has that been for you, and where is that going?
Yeah, so I'm a software engineer by trade. I moved to the Bay to work for these huge tech companies. Like Apple and Cisco, and I wasn't really happy in those spaces because one, you're just like a cog in the machine in this like corporate world, right? And also it's like, where is the queer tech, right? So about 4 years ago, I started building this company called Queeery. And the 5-second elevator pitch is like, it's essentially an event promotion platform for the queer community to find other queer events, to find other people within the community, to find resources, and to essentially be the source of the LGBT community that's outside of these tech companies. Because these tech companies also have, they hold our datas in the vault, right? But it's essentially just like an ad machine, right? They're just trying to spit out ads to a certain demographic. And our demographic is like, oh yeah, spit out this particular ad for this trans person or whatever. It's really for like the bottom dollar. So the idea with Queeery is for us to own our own data and keep queer coin within the queer community, and don't have it basically outsourced to all these tech companies that essentially are monopolies in a sense, right? So, I'm an advocate for just queer tech and providing services and a different perspective that's really like FUBU, like for us, by us, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. So where's it going? Like, what's the next step?
Yeah, so we released our MVP, which is a minimum viable product, about 2 years ago. And since then, we have done some transformations because of data issues and things of that nature. So now, essentially, what we want to do is be the source of queer data, essentially. And so
I love that. Be the source of
queer data. We are the source of queer data and don't have it into these huge monopolies. So essentially, we are working right now on version 2 of Queeery, and we are set to have it released by end of 2023.
Ooh, okay. Well, I'm having all these ideas, but we can talk about that later.
Let's go.
But yeah, that's amazing. I don't know. So for the queer entrepreneurs, we talk a lot about business too on this podcast. Like for the queer and trans entrepreneurs out there, like what advice would you give for people who are trying to kind of free themselves from being a cog in the machine and kind of own their own, like have that financial freedom?
Yeah, so basically, like, we all got to pay bills, right? And then just start small, right? We put so much weight on these things, coming from experience, saying, oh, I was supposed to do this by X amount of time, I was supposed to do this, right? Do as much as you can right now. If you have a vision, write down the goals, write down a plan, and essentially start small. It doesn't have to be some grandiose, huge thing at first. Also, there is, in the tech sectors especially, there's an organization called Start Out, and it's for startups, for people in the LGBT community. You can be a mentor or mentee, and I've been in these programs where I've spoken to other queer people, and they've given me advice, and eventually I want to also be a mentor to people that are trying to move up the ranks and not be a cog in this corporate heteronormative machine.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard, but it's worth it. We promise. Well, we'll report back about that.
The struggle,
yeah.
right? Right. And it takes time.
Yeah.
You know, we want things yesterday, and it's a process.
Yeah, that's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I
Thank
do
you.
want to ask you one question. I know you don't necessarily identify as trans, but trans adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
But what is your trans adjacent agenda?
Yeah, trans adjacent agenda. You're using my words. It's perfect. That's perfect. It's just basically be as authentic as you can as possible. And even if you feel like you're in the wrong body, like, you know, when I was born, I said, you know, why was I given this body? Come to acceptance with who you really are. Be as authentic as possible. And and let go of that resistance of trying to fit into a certain type of mold. The more authentic you are with yourself, the happier you're gonna have. You're gonna have inner happiness and peace. You know, I'm sure every trans person, intersex person, even queer person could identify with when they were being authentic with themselves, it threw this weight off their shoulders.
That's beautiful. Yay, thank you.
Thank you, Niko.
Trans individuals face unique challenges every day. From accessing healthcare to navigating legal systems, it is crucial that we work towards creating a society that is inclusive and supportive of people of all gender identities. This means advocating for policies and practices that prioritize the health and well-being of trans individuals, as well as challenging discriminatory attitudes and behaviors where they exist. By coming together to support and uplift trans voices, we can create a brighter and more equitable future for everyone. Thank you for listening, and let us continue to work towards a world where trans individuals can thrive. Follow us on all social media platforms at Transclinique, and don't forget to like this video and hit the subscribe button.